small group tonight.
Thank you. The first question is, you mentioned there was a Citizens Oversight Committee. I was wondering if that Oversight Committee would have any authority.
In what regard?
They're only empowered to make recommendations, or they're just going to monitor the financials, or are they going to be able to change what items would actually qualify for items that would be covered with the sales tax?
I don't believe that's written into the ordinance for that committee. They again are just reviewing the list of projects that we're paying for,
Okay.
and reporting to the public and commissioners as to whether or not.
Okay, and so if there's a problem, it's incumbent upon the commissioners to take action on it.
And that committee would be probably doing so as well. I mean, that's.
So they are empowered.
Well, they would be reporting annually to the commissioners and the public as to whether or not the funding was spent on these projects.
I think you'd be making findings of consistency with both the ordinance and the list that's adopted and making recommendations based on those findings. Thank you. Be my understanding.
There's the checks and balances to make sure no fraud.
Okay. The next question was, you mentioned that it was going to cover things like sidewalk improvements and bike lanes. And I mean, some districts have MSTUs or BUs that have already, where this is already paid for. Would it go to those districts as well to help them recoup their cost for sidewalks? So it's for places that don't have MSTUs and BUs.
And they far outnumber those that do.
Okay. Then also, there's some areas where the school board is responsible for putting sidewalks in. How would this half-cent sales tax relate to that? A good example would be and the name eludes me, 27th Avenue and 26th Street East at that intersection where there's a big facility for school buses and everything. There's no sidewalks on 27th Avenue east of 26th Street, and with all of that traffic from the school buses, there's a huge problem there. And I was told, not to really get into specifics, but that I would have to approach the school board about that. And so I was wondering if this half-cent sales tax would be something that could be used for sidewalks in that area.
Yes, it can, and those are actually both on the list.
I think you mean 26th Avenue, not 27th
You're already on the
Avenue.
list.
They're both on
Did
the
I
list.
get mixed up?
Yeah, 26th
They're both
Avenue.
on the list.
But, I mean, you've got the right intersection. It's there where Mixon's is on the
Yes,
northwest corner of
yes.
Manatee's
Oh,
across the
26th
street.
Avenue.
Yeah.
So I think the intersection and the sidewalks on both roads, one specifically as a sidewalk project and the other one as a road project that includes adding a sidewalk. But I think you'll find that they're both on the list.
Well, I know the request east of 26th Street has been denied numerous
East of-
years.
Yeah.
So that is something that would be covered?
Is that 26th Avenue here, from 27th Street East to 45th Street East?
Yes.
Yeah.
Looks
Yes.
like
Yes.
$449,000 for road drainage and sidewalk.
Oh, beautiful. Okay.
And predominantly the Sugar House Creek folks are asking, not the school board.
Okay.
That's the request. The request is not from the school board.
No, right, but I was told that the school board would be responsible for approving and initiating the action on that.
It's on the list, but typically we go with the school board's list of sidewalk first. And then there's another list which is citizen request. Citizen request, this particular one is all the mobile home park, just north of the bus depot.
Okay.
And yes, it was denied, and on this tax list, it's included.
Okay. Thank you. The next question was, you mentioned the 911 next gen technology, and I was wondering if the half-cent sales tax would be used for the actual infrastructure or for personnel for 911 or both?
The infrastructure sales tax cannot be used for people. Our commissioners in the past 2 budget cycles have approved funding under the set millage, for new 911 call takers. It's one of the few areas of the county budget that's grown in terms of people. Our public safety department, we've got a new ambulance unit out in parish and new 911 call takers. The infrastructure sales tax cannot be spent on people, and it would go to pay for technology.
So it's this, the new next-gen emergency communication system is stuff that this half-cent sales tax would help cover?
Yeah. Right now, these projects are all on a list to do somewhere, and they would take place over time. It would, in some cases, take many years to get around to, and this, I think our next Gen 911 has been a request before the board for several years. But they haven't been
As far as the construction is already underway for siding, from what I understand.
Oh, we're talking maybe about the P25 radio system?
Yeah.
That's a little bit different. That's
Okay.
so the next gen 911 technology, again, the way my
misspoke. The P25.
P25 is more for the first responders and their radio technology. Right. And that involves the tall towers that we see around town. And it's bringing them up to 21st century technology as opposed to the old analog stuff that, calls dropped along, the far-flung areas out in near Cortez and Mayaca. This is going to give those guys greater coverage.
All right, so
That's
that's
P25.
funded by the half-cent sales
Well,
tax?
no, our commissioners issued a bond, and that's the way we've got to do a lot of major projects right now is bonding.
Okay.
44th Avenue is one example, Fort Hammer Bridge, the P25 radio. They're going out and borrowing
All right.
and paying it down over time with property taxes.
A neat point that goes on, you passively made that point, is these are new projects that are not funded within the CIP. They might be projects of record or things that we've always wanted to do. They're viable projects. They're not. There is not a current funding source for it. That's what moves them up to be in there. Kind of like that's why P25 is under construction, because it is funded.
Okay. I appreciate you answering my neophyte questions, but hey, I'm learning a lot.
Hey, you're good.
Good. Those were good questions.
She's been listening.
You mentioned the aging helicopter by the sheriff would be one of the things that would be covered by this infrastructure sales tax. The county's also been getting reimbursements from the sheriff at the end of the year because he doesn't expend, if he had any money left over in his budget. And then they've been turning that money back over to the sheriff for the purchase of a new helicopter.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know what the cost of the new helicopter is, but my impression was that that was the way that helicopter was going to be funded, and that the half-cent sales tax really wasn't in play for that.
I think the helicopter's like $3 million. We've been putting a couple $100,000, $300,000 when he gives it back to us a year towards it. This is to get it funded, because he has one now that's old and another one that they don't use, that's antiquated. And this was a way to fund it. This is a list from the sheriff.
Can I answer that question?
Yeah, this is a list from the sheriff and what he wanted in his department.
I can try to get the cost
Yeah,
of
we'll
that
get you the cost.
helicopter for you.
Well, that's irrelevant. I just wondered if the half-cent sales tax was in addition to the funding that's, been ongoing towards that helicopter or whether all of that funding will go for something else now if the half-cent sales tax is approved.
When the board returns those dollars to the sheriff, does he have full discretion on how those dollars can be spent, or is it your expectation that they get spent on?
This last budget, the sheriff, the sheriff committed to put some towards the helicopter because it's going to take a few years to save up for it. That's why, but on his list too, this oversight committee will make sure whatever's on his list, correct? they have to, it'll be spent on that, so even though, whatever it costs, that infrastructure tax will pay for it, and then that's done with that project. I mean, he's got other projects. We have a freezer last year that we paid $3 million for.
2 million,
How much?
2.2
Oh,
million.
I keep thinking it's 3 million, but I still remember that. That it took us, we're just now getting ready, we approved it last year, but with the funding, we couldn't get it till this year. So he has this designated list like all other departments would have to stick by, and the oversight committee will make sure we do.
Okay, but say the $500,000 or $600,000 that the county has already reimbursed to the sheriff for the helicopter, whatever number that is. What happens to that money if the sales tax gets approved?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a
I
good
can't
question.
answer it.
Yes.
I would assume that he would, that goes toward it, and I don't know if he's given us a budgeted estimate, I can look and see. I've got a more detailed project list in my bag over here.
I think you're gonna have to reply to that one, Nick.
Yeah.
We're gonna need to talk to Salisbury, because I don't, none of us are
Tom's
gonna,
not
He's
there.
retired.
Neil,
shucks.
what other questions, Catherine?
Okay, the other question I had was, it looked like, when the list of approved, expenditures for this half-cent sales tax was being generated, that quite a few departments, from the county and constitutionals as well, jumped in to get a bunch of their vehicles, included in that half-cent sales tax. And I'm personally just having issues with vehicles being counted as part of infrastructure. Helicopter, okay, I can live with that, but
I'm not aware of any vehicles on the county's list. Again, I can give you the detailed breakdown of what all the county projects are, but I don't believe any vehicle expenditures is on the county list.
there are vehicles on the list. Maybe I might have misspoke on the Department of Public Safety, but I don't believe so. And
As an
certainly
ambulance?
certainly from the sheriff, vehicles.
We'll have to look. Sheriff?
I thought it was fire trucks from the city.
Oh, fire.
If it was the
I,
city,
I,
there was the
I, I didn't want to speak without speaking with authority, but I believe that Longbow Key was proposing some police vehicles, but I'm not positive about that. I'm going to make note to follow up with you on that.
The municipalities have their separate list because their funding comes per the state statute. This is your portion of the sales tax, and they're 100% responsible for their portion. So we're trying to put their lists up as they provide them to us, just so the citizens can see them all. But the county commission doesn't have any oversight over their spending of their portion of the funding.
Well, when I visited the website, I didn't see any mention of vehicles anywhere, but if you read the proposal, it is shoehorned in there, and so that.
Per the statute, I mean, everything that's in there is written around the statute, especially on the public safety side. Those are very specialized typically.
Okay. And wrapping up, I know the county has professed an interest in building a pool in the northern part of the county. I'm not exactly clear where having a pool built in the northern county is, but is that pool something that would be covered under the half-cent sales tax?
Actually, the pool would be a new facility and it would be covered through our impact fee.
Okay.
And should be, for that matter. I mean, that was where I was gonna go, Danny, was to say, this is an infrastructure, so it needs to exist today. We're rehabbing, we're making it better, we're refurbing it. I mean, it's meant to be, the parking lot's worn out, I either need to resurface it or rip it out and put a new parking lot in. It's supposed to take care of things we already have today.
One of the projects in this tonight that's on the board is East Braden Pool to be rehabbed.
Right. Okay, well, thank you so very much.
Thank you. Sir? You had so much fun the other night.
Yes, I did, and I didn't get to ask any questions either.
Well, there's only 3 or 4 here, so we
Which
allowed
night was
it.
that? We're losing track.
Yeah.
Okay, 25 million a year for 15 years is 375 million. The resolution, the way I read it, it seems to indicate that 375 million includes interest. I'm just wondering how much interest will be spent under this project.
My
Under
understanding
this,
is we're estimating
tax.
4% interest growth annually. So I'm not sure where in the resolution. I know.
Section 2,
Okay.
right there at the top.
So it states what?
Section 2, right there at the top.
Okay. Inclusive of interest and investment. Yes. So your question is
How much is interest?
about 4% is our estimate. Our annual estimate is 4% growth.
That's growth in the
That's
tax.
growth.
Yeah, it's
There's no way
not-
getting this for-
Yeah, that's,
Yeah,
the 4% is the.
Based on population?
estimated-
You speak up quite low.
4% is the estimated increase in the surtax receipts per year. I think our interest earnings will depend on how quickly we spend the money and what the investment rates are, but we borrow at pretty low rates and we make fairly low rates of interest on our investment. And so, my understanding though is that color of money stays the same. So infrastructure surtax money that gets interest becomes more infrastructure surtax money. So it gets spent on the same types of projects.
this isn't an objective to make money on the thing, because we would establish what's a reasonable expectation of expenditure for a current time period. And if we went ahead and we borrowed ahead, or did anything to go ahead, because we can only spend either what we have or what we potentially borrowed again, we would only borrow what we would need to spend. We wouldn't go get the whole 375 and put it in the bank, is what I guess I'm trying to say. That's definitely not the intent.
And I understand all
Okay.
of that. And I
And plus,
understand
we're all
what-
out of our element here. We would probably need to hook you up with our financial management.
Okay.
That's the answer to
Well,
that
and
question.
I also understand what he's saying about 4% growth in
The expectation.
the proceeds. But my question is, of the 375 million that will increase at 4%, how much of that money is interest? In other words, I'm assuming that because this was 15 years, you anticipated an income stream. You had the income stream, so therefore that would make it easier for you to borrow money rather than a 3-year or a 5-year tax issue. So because it's easier to borrow, I'm just curious how much you anticipate that the cost of borrowing will be.
$25 million a year over 15 years is $375 million. That's where you're coming up with the 375?
Right.
We weren't going to overcommit to that interest in case we have another recession. We weren't going to overestimate the number of projects.
We go.
Yeah, Clark.
Our cost estimates for our projects are in constant dollars. They're all present day dollars. And so our revenue estimates are also held in constant dollars. So as the revenue goes up, so will our cost. I mean, we could have tried to guess when we would fund particular projects and increase those and increase the revenues, but it is very difficult to do that with these projects at this stage, because the design hasn't been completed for a lot of them, and some will be complex and take longer, and so you won't know those costs. So it's all held in, I think, 2015, 2016 dollars, something, whatever we use as our base for that. But they'll both grow over time, would be our expectation.
Okay, here's my question. Let's say we're talking about $100. And if you're borrowing $100 for a year at 4% interest, the amount of interest you pay is $4. So, the question I'm asking, out of this $375 million, I'm assuming that at some point you're going to be borrowing money, and when you borrow money, you're going to pay interest on it. How much interest did you anticipate when these projects were set up and the amount of the sales tax was established?
That's a
That is a question for our
But you know
financial
what?
management
We'll
department.
get you the answer, right?
Yeah, if
That's
I
a
can
good
get your
question.
contact information, we can
That's
follow
a
up
good
with you this
question.
week.
Okay, good question.
One more question.
Yes, sir.
Okay. if I recall right, sitting in a commissioners meeting, it was indicated that originally there was $1 billion worth of projects, although since then I've heard originally it was $1.5 billion. And then county set their priorities, came up with $375 million. So my question is, in 2 or 3 or 5 years, are you going to come back and ask us for a whole penny sales tax in order to fund these other projects that apparently are not being funded now?
I haven't heard any discussion about that. This was,
Carol, am I
again,
right about the $1 billion?
It was $1
But
billion, but
Mr.
I can tell you right now that this commissioner, who's been there the longest, has no intentions of coming back. I mean, we needed something stable to get us in our emergent needs, and then hopefully the county and the population will grow, we'll be able to take care and maintain. But right now, we're kind of like in a hole, like you've heard some of the examples that Catherine gave. So no, I don't intend to do it.
the number didn't change. If a
No.
different number was thrown out, I'm not sure when and by whom, but the
Mr.
Public Works
Hunziker.
list was $1.5 billion of roads projects, and I could supply you with that. The committee discussed briefly a full cent. They saw that as not a palatable increase that the voters would take seriously, especially since the school district was asking for a half-cent renewal. To ask for a full cent to make a bigger dent in the $1.5 billion, they thought was too much. And so, again, this 13-member panel, 13 members unanimously agreed that half-cent will be a good enough dent in the list. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, basically. May I ask one more?
Sure.
This oversight committee.
Sir.
I'm really confused. I mean, I read the resolution and I thought I understood, but then explanations that have been given about it since then seem to differ from the resolution. My understanding is the only thing the oversight committee does is make sure that the money that is being spent is in accordance with the list and the percentages that are set in there. But I think the impression has been given that the oversight committee can somehow change that. And that's not my understanding. But my understanding is that the commissioners can change that list at any time by amending the resolution. So this list that you see there is not necessarily the list that we'll get.
All right, so if I said something tonight or Thursday night and I misspoke, my understanding is this committee is to, again, ensure that we're spending it on projects that we say we're going to spend it on. If a future county commission wants to amend the list, there is nothing in either ordinance creating the sales tax or the oversight committee that prevents them from doing that. Ultimately, the oversight group will then report on whether or not the annual list is adhered to. Is that? I believe that's
my
everyone's
understanding.
Okay.
As far as the oversight committee, has it been formed already, or?
No, sir.
Want to be on it? No. Put your name in.
What would happen if voters approve the sales tax on November 8th? It really starts wheels in motion on the other things that need to be put in place, including that citizens oversight group. Right now, there's just a concept, and we wanted to be able to show the voters that the construct is there to create this 7-member panel of people. And the way we do it with other advisory committees is I'll send out a press release, and then hopefully sometimes the media will run it. Our elected officials will then share it maybe with their constituents. And the hope is that we get word out that there is a new Citizens Advisory Board, 7 people, and they usually stagger the terms, so you're appointing 3 during one year, and then a year later you're doing 4. So they're staggered terms, and then the commissioners vote, and a majority will appoint that person for the 7-member panel.
Don't forget to apply.
We had a good example of that today. Citizens apply, board reviews, boards are the ones that actually throw put people on the floor for the board to vote on, and then it gets voted on in an open meeting, as far as who's the actual appointees.
That leaves you.
Would you like to know? Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I've had citizens ask me, where do you get the signs? I've actually had a few.
Where do we
say,
get the signs?
Where do people get if they want to put them in the yard? Because we've seen a few, and I don't know where to tell them.
Well, the county doesn't have political
We don't have
signs. We've got the half-cent, and nowhere on our website and on any of our written materials are we saying go vote for or against this thing. I think you're referring to the Forward Manatee group. That's the PAC, and the Chamber of Commerce has Forward Manatee signs that people can pick up. I don't even think it requires a donation.
Because I think there's I know about 5 or 6 people that asked me, and I had no clue even where to tell them.
The Chamber has
Okay,
signs.
thanks.
Okay, anything else?
Mayor, nothing?
How many people are from Palmetto?
What about District 2? Yeah? No, you're not District 2, Sherry. You're District 1.
East District.
I wanted to make sure you knew exactly where you live. Any other questions? If not, sir, if I can get your contact information, I think we've got yours. All right, you email us a lot.